Imagine a world where armored knights clashed beneath towering fortresses, and massive siege weapons decided the fate of kingdoms. I'm standing in front of what looks like a very, very old wall, and for centuries, walls like this were the pinnacle of defensive technology. But for every brilliant piece of defensive engineering, there's an equally brilliant piece of offensive engineering designed to tear it all down. The medieval period wasn't just an age of knights and castles, it was a relentless high-stakes arms race. It was a time when the fate of kingdoms could hinge on the curve of a yew-bow, the tension of a crossbow string, or the precise counterweight of a giant throwing arm. It was a fascinating, brutal, and surprisingly scientific world. Today, we're going to dive into that world. We'll explore the tools that defined an era of conflict, from the weapons that could rain death from a distance to the colossal machines built to smash stone to rubble. We're going to look at the incredible ingenuity that went into both attacking and defending these massive fortifications. This isn't just about swords and shields. This is about the technology that shaped nations, the physics that won battles, and the engineering that kept people safe or sealed their doom. So, join me as we unpack the medieval arsenal. We'll look at the revolutionary impact of the longbow, the brute force of the crossbow, and the siege engines that became legends in their own right. We will also examine the other side of the equation, the evolution of personal armor, and the clever, often deadly architectural tricks that made castles such formidable fortresses. It's a story of innovation, desperation, and the constant struggle for the upper hand. Let's start with something that from a distance looks deceptively simple. A long piece of wood and a string, but the English longbow was anything but simple. It was a genuine superweapon of its time. Standing as tall as a person, typically crafted from a single piece of yew, its power was legendary. The real genius was in its construction. The outer wood of the yew branch, the sapwood, is good at resisting tension, while the inner heartwood is good at handling compression. A longbow is essentially a natural spring storing a massive amount of energy. This wasn't a weapon you could just pick up and use. An archer trained from childhood, developing the immense upper body strength required to draw a bow with a weight of over 100, sometimes even 150 pounds. Skeletons of longbowmen found from the period show developed shoulder blades and arms, a physical testament to their lifelong dedication. This intense training created a class of professional soldiers who could loose up to 12 arrows a minute, a cloud of arrows, as chroniclers described it, that could darken the sky and decimate enemy formations before they even got close. The battles of Crécy and Agincourt are the classic examples. Here, English armies, vastly outnumbered, used disciplined volleys of longbow fire to utterly destroy the flower of French chivalry. The bodkin point arrows they used were specifically designed to punch through plate armor, turning the greatest strength of the mounted knight, his expensive, heavy protection, into a fatal liability. The longbow didn't just win battles, it challenged the entire social and military structure of feudal Europe. It proved that a trained commoner could kill a noble lord from 200 yards away. Now, if the longbow was the weapon of the highly trained specialist, the crossbow was the weapon for everyone else. And that made it incredibly dangerous. Its mechanics are straightforward: a bow, or prod, mounted horizontally on a stock. Instead of relying on pure muscle power to hold the string, you use a mechanism, often a crank called a crane quin or a pulley system called a windlass, to draw it back. The string then locks into place and the bolt is ready to be fired at the pull of a trigger. It's a design that feels almost modern. This ease of use was its greatest asset. You could take a conscripted peasant, give them a crossbow, and with minimal training they could operate a weapon capable of piercing the thickest armor at close range. The kinetic energy delivered by a crossbow bolt was immense, far greater than a contemporary bow, albeit over a shorter range. This meant that a garrison of crossbowmen, protected by castle walls, could present a lethal threat to any attacker who got too close. It democratized killing on the battlefield in a way that was, for the nobility, deeply unsettling. The power and simplicity of the crossbow were so effective, in fact, that the Church tried to ban it. The Second Lateran Council in 1139 decreed it a weapon hateful to God and unfit for Christians, though they conveniently made an exception for using it against non-Christians. The ban, of course, was almost universally ignored. The crossbow was simply too good, too effective, and too easy to deploy. It was the medieval equivalent of a point-and-shoot camera, except the only thing it shot was death. When you couldn't go over a castle wall and you couldn't go through it, you had to start knocking it down, and for that you needed siege engines. One of the earliest and most common was the catapult. The term catapult is actually a bit of a catch-all, but the one most people think of is the mangonel. It's a torsion-powered weapon. At its heart are massive bundles of twisted rope, sinew or hair, wound incredibly tight. A long wooden arm is thrust through the middle of these bundles. To operate it, a team of soldiers would use a winch to pull the arm back, increasing the twist and therefore the stored potential energy in the rope bundles. A projectile, usually a large rock but sometimes less pleasant things like diseased animal carcasses or even captured messengers, would be placed in a sling or bucket at the end of the arm. When the release catch was triggered, the stored energy in the twisted ropes would unleash, whipping the arm forward at incredible speed. The arm would slam into a crossbar, and the projectile would continue its arc, flying over walls and into the courtyard beyond. The mangonel wasn't a precision instrument. Its purpose wasn't to hit a specific window or gate. It was an area denial weapon. You'd use it to bombard the inside of a castle, making life for the defenders terrifying and dangerous. The constant threat of a 100-pound rock falling out of the sky had a huge psychological impact. It could smash rooftops, disrupt supply lines, and injure or kill defenders, slowly grinding down their will to fight. It was noisy, messy, and a fundamental tool in the art of the medieval siege. If the mangonel was a sledgehammer, the trebuchet was a wrecking ball. This was the heavyweight champion of siege weaponry, a masterpiece of medieval engineering that relied not on tension or torsion, but on something far more powerful and reliable: gravity. A trebuchet is essentially a giant lever. On one end, you have a long throwing arm with a sling for the projectile. On the other, a massive counterweight, a box filled with tons of rock, earth, or lead. It's physics on a terrifying scale. The operation was a huge undertaking. A large crew would use capstans or treadwheels to slowly winch the long arm down, raising the colossal counterweight into the air. This process stored an enormous amount of gravitational potential energy. Once the projectile was loaded into the sling and the arm was released, the counterweight would plummet, swinging the arm upwards with immense force. The sling adds another layer of mechanical advantage, whipping the projectile forward at the peak of the arc at incredible speeds. Unlike the mangonel, the trebuchet could be surprisingly accurate. By keeping the projectile weight and counterweight consistent, siege engineers could repeatedly hit the same spot on a castle wall. Day after day, a projectile weighing 300 pounds or more would slam into the same section of stone. It wouldn't break through on the first or even the 10th hit, but it would introduce microscopic fractures, and with each subsequent impact, those fractures would grow until eventually, with a deafening roar, the wall would crumble. This was psychological warfare and applied physics combined, the ultimate expression of medieval destructive power. So, with all these terrifying weapons, how did anyone possibly survive? The answer lies in an equally impressive field of engineering defense. The most personal line of defense was, of course, armor. It evolved directly in response to the weapons it faced. Early mail, or chainmail, was excellent against slashing swords, but vulnerable to a forceful spear thrust or a bodkin arrow. As weapons got better at piercing, armor had to get better at deflecting. This led to the development of plate armor. By the 15th century, a wealthy knight was encased in a beautifully articulated suit of steel. This wasn't the clumsy, clanking armor you see in movies. A well-made suit was custom-fitted, distributing its weight so effectively that a knight could still run, mount a horse, and even do a somersault. Every curve was designed to deflect blows. A strike that landed squarely would glance off the rounded surfaces of the helmet or breastplate, robbing the attack of its energy. Armor was the medieval equivalent of a personal tank, a testament to the incredible skill of the armorer. And then there were the castles themselves. They were far more than just big walls. They were a series of traps and obstacles. The approach might be a steep, clear slope, giving archers a perfect field of fire. The main gate would be protected by a drawbridge, a portcullis, and murder holes above, from which defenders could drop rocks, hot sand, or quicklime. The walls themselves had crenellations for archers to shoot from behind cover. and towers were often rounded, not square, to better deflect projectiles from trebuchets. Every single element of a castle's design was a deadly, calculated response to the tools of the attacker. So, from the personal battlefield dominance of a longbowman to the industrial-scale destruction of the trebuchet, medieval warfare was a constant, violent conversation between offense and defense. Each new weapon prompted a new defense, and each new defense prompted an even more ingenious weapon. The clang of a swordsmith's hammer, the creak of a siege engine's winch, and the silent calculations of a castle architect were all part of the same grand, deadly symphony. These weren't just tools of war, they were the engines of change that shaped the physical and political landscape of the world we know. The next time you see a castle, whether it's a ruin on a hill or a pristine restoration, don't just see a pretty building. See it for what it was, a machine for survival. Imagine the sky dark with arrows, the air filled with the whistle of crossbow bolts and the sickening thud of a trebuchet stone hitting the walls. Imagine being a defender on the ramparts, peering through a narrow arrow slit, or an attacker huddling behind a wooden shield, knowing that a single mistake could be your last. It's in that moment, in that imagined chaos, that you can truly appreciate the terrifying genius of the medieval arsenal. The ingenuity on display from both the attackers and the defenders is a powerful reminder that for much of history, innovation wasn't driven by convenience or comfort, but by the primal urgent need to survive. The echoes of that struggle are still written in the stones of every castle wall.